Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for turning out for our Junior Parent Night, and welcome students as well. It's nice to see all of you out here. I was not sure how many people might show up since we haven't had a lot of in-person programs in the last year or so. So I appreciate you coming out. We do have LCTV filming tonight, so this will be broadcast on the LCTV channel, on the YouTube station, which I can certainly send out so that people know where to find it. So this is our Junior Parent Night, and I'm Donna Lyons, Director of School Counseling. We have 4 panelists from a variety of colleges, so I'll introduce them. To my left is Lakia Newland, and she is the Dean of Admission at Mount Holyoke College. To her left is Erin Bernard from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. She is the Associate Director of First Year Reading. To her left is Mike Rossi, and he is an admission coordinator at Springfield Technical Community College. And then to Mike's left is Jason Cloutier, and he is the area director, or regional director of admission from Xavier University. Before I get to the main portion of our program, and that's certainly with our panelists, I want to just talk a little bit about how we will be working with our juniors over the next several weeks. Some of you may have seen the email that went out this afternoon. It was copied to parents and guardians, to our students with a calendar, with the date and time that they're expected to meet with us in their individual meeting. And these individual meetings are to continue the post-secondary planning discussion. And I say continue because, honestly, these discussions begin as soon as their 9th grade years, when we're just getting to know them a little bit. We're talking to them, finding out what they're involved in, the courses that they're taking, how their 9th grade year is going. But we also talk briefly about, what are you thinking about? And we know that, in 9th grade, certainly the plans that they talk about then are not necessarily what they're actually going to do when they leave here, but they have some ideas. And we continue to nurture those ideas throughout their 4 years. We just finished meeting with our sophomores, and our sophomores, we introduced them to the Naviance program, the internet-based career and college program, and we hope that they'll use that program to begin to do some of the personal assessments that are available in Naviance, to begin to do some career research as well as college research, if that's what they choose to do. And then here we are at our Junior Parent Night, and we're going to be meeting with our juniors to continue that plan. I hope that many juniors have continued to use Naviance or other tools to continue to look at what they want to do. And that includes, the discussions about what courses they want to take every year, what that plan looks like in terms of what they're doing outside of their education, such as sports and clubs and work and maybe some research or other things that they do in the summer. So it's an ongoing process for students from their 9th grade on through their senior year. The plan is that we hope we will have them prepared for whatever they want to do after they leave high school. So with that said, I want to get to the main part of our program. So the focus on tonight's program is on the college search, selection, and application process. What students basically need to be doing now to prepare for the application process next fall, and what is of importance to colleges in this selection process. So the format will be, I will present specific questions to our panelists. In some cases, I may ask a specific person to answer it. In other cases, I'll ask all of them to answer the questions. So to begin, this is a fairly general question, and I'm going to ask everyone if they want to weigh in on this question. When students just begin the process of researching colleges, what advice would you provide to help students identify colleges that might be of interest to them? Do you want to start?
Sure. All right. Hello? Can you hear me? I can't, okay. I can't tell if anyone can hear me. Good. All right. So I know that we're in a virtual world now, and it's much easier to discover new colleges and universities that you might be interested in without ever really having to conduct a school visit. So if you are using websites to look up schools or going right to their institutional websites, I'd recommend, first and foremost, just starting with checking out what types of majors they have. So, you know, school is about learning, right? So we want you to be happy with the academic environment that we provide at our institutions for you. So seeing what our majors may be and if we have the majors you're interested in, and also really drilling down to see what those majors may require. So that's different at every school, and some schools want you to have certain math or science requirements for particular types of majors in the STEM areas, or you may need to submit a portfolio when you apply. So starting to think early about how to prepare your application to be as strong as possible for the academic pursuits you're interested in would be one thing that you can do even at this time. So I'll stop there.
So I would say that, you know, one of the good things, like Kia said, is that because we're in a virtual world, a lot of schools will have virtual visit options. But you guys are lucky that you live in an area that has a lot of local schools, and they're different types of schools that are also doing in-person visits. So you can kind of, without going too far out of this area or your comfort zone, visit a lot of different schools that offer different things, whether it's size or different majors, different fields, and see what you like, what you don't like, and then you can kind of research outside this area, whether it's virtually or in person, based on the things that you found that you're interested in or that you really took to, in order to kind of broaden your search. But I would say starting with visiting the schools in the area and kind of getting a feel for what you like from certain schools, what you don't like, is a really good place to start.
I actually don't have anything to add. Those were very good questions. That's what I was going to say. So.
Okay, put me right on the spot. Thanks, Mike. First of all, thank you so much for being here this evening on a frigid night. I will tell you that where Xavier University is located in Cincinnati, Ohio, it's exactly the same temperature here as it is in Cincinnati. So if you're looking for a warmer, more balmy climate, I would say go a little further south than Ohio. With that being said, and I like what a couple of my colleagues have already mentioned about, you know, visiting, you know, like the 5-college system out here in Western Mass, very fortunate to have the strength of curriculum that these schools provide right here in your own backyard. But I think when you start really narrowing down your selection list, you have to ask yourself a type of question that's going to add some introspection to your decision, meaning, why do you even want to go to college to begin with? What is motivating you to pursue education beyond Long Meadow High School? This is a conscious decision that you're making. No one's forcing you to do this. And at least from my perspective, working at a university that receives probably 15,000 applications in a cycle, it's never lost on me when I read any application that student somehow discovered Xavier, and there might be a potential match here. So my job as an admission counselor is to try to find this match and try to make it so then I'm setting you up for success. I'm not setting the student up for failure. I want to see you succeed, and I want to see you succeed in exactly 8 semesters and not a semester longer. So you have to figure out, do you want to stay local? Do you want a large school? Do you want a smaller school? Do you want to be in-state? Do you want to be out-of-state? Do you want Catholic? Do you want non-secular? What is it that's driving you and that's motivating you to look at the 3,500 some odd schools that there are in the U.S.? Okay?
Thank you. This next question is related to finding balance in the list that you develop for the colleges that you apply to. So how would you recommend a student does this? How do they create or begin to create a balanced list of colleges? Erin, you want to start?
I want to start that. Me?
Down there? Anybody?
Yeah,
Anyway.
So you definitely want to have a wide variety of schools as far as your, I guess, academic ability. So you want to have schools that you're pretty confident you're going to get into. You know, that's kind of the usual thing that people think of. There's like your safety schools, your mid-level schools, and your reach schools. So you definitely want to make sure you have a wide variety. But I think it's also good to make sure you have a wide variety of financial opportunities as well. So kind of the schools that might cost a little less, maybe schools that might be a reach. But having a variety is really good, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a variety of what we call sticker price is, but you might get a good idea of how much money you're going to get from a specific school that can affect how much you're going to pay. So, you know, a lot of schools on their website will have a calculator that you can kind of see what you would be expected to pay at that school, and you can kind of compare that to how much it costs. But I would also say that a lot of times if you're applying to a school, and it depends on how much, you know, award money they give, but if you're applying to a school where you might be one of the higher academic applicants at that school, they do tend to give you more money. And so I think in that case, it's really important that you're thinking about schools not just for a name or for what you think is going to be, you know, maybe the best, the hardest to get into. You're really looking at schools that are the best fit for you, and that includes a financial decision. And I think the only other piece of advice I have is creating a balance list is like, yes, it's okay to have like a favorite, but make sure you like all the schools on your list and would be happy going to all of them, because you'll get in somewhere, most likely multiple places, and you'll have a great experience wherever you go. So there's tons of schools out there, and when you're making your list, just make sure you like them all the ones you're applying to.
I might also add that I think what we do as administrators is we're looking for, you know, some of the brightest and most talented students that will succeed inside the classroom. But you as parents in the room know your kids better than anyone. So I want you to be realistic with them, and also understand that, you know, students will be inside a classroom 6, 7, maybe 8 hours throughout the course of the day. What are they doing for the other 2/3 of the time? So you have to figure out the area around that particular university, that particular college, that you're going to be hanging your hat for 4 years and calling home. Is that where you want to be? Because as much as you're going to be, you know, inside the classroom for 6 hours, you know, have 3, 4, 5 hours of homework, whatever, but you're also going to be actively engaged in the student body. So you're going to be joining clubs and groups and organizations, and these are the types of things that your tuition dollars are also contributing to. So understand that the city or the rural area or the suburban area, wherever that school is located, that's your home for the next 4 years. You want to be comfortable being there. And you also want to understand that, you know, I've been doing this for a couple of decades. I've said this to parents routinely. Half of the reason why a student goes to college is to get the education to propel them through the rest of their life, through the rest of their career, their vocation. The other half is to mature, become an adult, get a full experience outside the home, and enjoy yourself. You have one shot at your 4-year experience. So.
I would also like to add, if it's okay, this idea of fit. Every college has its own culture, almost its own personality. You have urban, you have rural, you have large colleges, you have small colleges. A student could go to a college that has the best program for their major in the country, but if the student doesn't like being there, it's not a good fit for the student, that is not a good college for that individual. Even though it's an excellent school, it's just not an excellent school for that person. So while it is harder in today's environment to actually get out to do campus visits in many cases, that idea of fit, of a place you go to, because it's going to be your home for 2 to 4 years, is really finding a place that you can see yourself and that you fit in and you feel comfortable. And that's a very important thing, a place where you belong. And every college has a different feel to it that may or may not be appropriate to an individual student.
Yeah, I think in the college selection process, you're going to hear that word a lot, fit. And it sounds so basic, but fit is so important. And I think, you know, students sometimes feed off of one another and people talk to one another. And fit is not about what is best for others, but it's what is best for you. And I think, you know, when students begin to heavily get into this process, I mean, like I said before, we talk about it in 9th grade, we talk about it in 10th grade, and we try to lead them through it. But if nothing's done in between, from sophomore year to junior year and then junior year to senior year, it does become stressful, and we don't want it to be that way. So the best advice that I could give is be prepared. Prepare yourself like you would for a quiz, a test, for a paper. You need to be prepared for it, or for a sport, or for anything that you do in life, you need to be prepared. And I always, every year we see these students who I don't know if they have this fear of the whole search process, and they become frozen and they don't do anything. And it's so important that you find those. There's not just one perfect place for you. There's many places, but it's all about doing your research. And I think visiting, as Erin had said earlier, we have so many schools in this area, small, large, public, private, 2-year. Even if you just go out and look at some of the schools locally to get a sense of what works for you. Not one of your friends, not what other families or parents are saying, but what's a good fit for you. And again, if you find that you select a school and it's not the right place, it's not a bad thing that you transfer. So there is, again, not that one perfect place. These next questions are related to the campus visit, and certainly the campus visit has taken on a whole new meaning in the last year or so. So this would be to everyone. In what capacity are you offering campus visits right now in this year? And if everybody can answer that.
So at Mount Holyoke, we are offering in-person guided tours with student tour guides and self-guided tours. So if you want to come by, use your smartphone to access a QR code and then walk yourself around campus and have essentially an audio accompany your trails through campus, you can do that. But we did pause them for the beginning of the year. One, because our students were away for interterm and we had just a few tour guides on campus, but we really needed them to help us with covering the phone so that we could process applications for students who are applying for this cycle. And then we opted to push that out a little further because the campus decided to stagger the return of students for the start of classes this month. So once that all sort of shakes out, everybody is done with their preliminary first couple of rounds of testing, and we know who needs to quarantine and who can come back to work, likely around February 7th, we'll continue to offer in-person tours so folks can go right to our website and sign up. We do have COVID protocols in place, so we ask that every visitor wear masks and that they also verify that they've been vaccinated and or boosted. If they have a vaccination card available, they can show it to us when they arrive. If not, they can show us that they have a negative PCR test or rapid test within 72 hours of their visit. And then we're going to continue along these lines for in-person programming in April for Yield. So we've already gotten approval to host our open house programs for admitted students in person. No idea if that's going to stick, but we're planning for it anyway.
So we also have, at UMass Amherst, we also have in-person tours and information sessions going on daily at this point and on Saturdays. We also have virtual sessions. They're usually once a week for prospective students. We have like an international night, and then we have domestic, and then we have an admitted students night coming up. And we also are planning right now to do our admitted students days in person. So if you have a senior that was admitted, then yeah, those right now are being planned in person. And I think we might also have some virtual options to go along with that. But right now it seems like for the foreseeable future, we're gonna do both and kind of see how that goes and what attendance looks like.
For a while at STCC, we had suspended and are currently suspending large group tours. For example, a typical high school group tour coming in because of the situation. If anyone is interested in individual or small tour, like a small family, 4 or less, we can definitely accommodate that in the admissions office. People are also welcome to come to campus, get a campus map, and do a self-guided tour, as has been talked about before. And then we also offer a virtual tour on our website, as well as several virtual open house events throughout the year.
Similarly to my colleagues, we would ordinarily have 2 admitted senior day programs in the spring, followed by a junior open house, and we have almost tripled that to try to keep the size of these programs to a reasonable number of attendees. And they're actually going to start probably at the beginning of March and go all the way through May 1st. But we do have regular tours and info sessions that we're hosting 5 days a week and certain select Saturdays.
Thank you. Yeah, I would encourage you to check into visitations for whatever colleges you may be looking at. It's so important to actually get on a campus and get the most out of the visit. These next questions are related to standardized testing. As many of you know, when COVID started, a lot of colleges had gone test optional due to many of the test centers closing down. And as they found in their decision-making in the admission office, they found that they were able to make these decisions, and they were sound decisions even without the standardized testing. With that said, many colleges are continuing over the next several years and maybe forever as test-optional schools. With so many colleges going test-optional, how should a student determine whether to send or not send their scores? Anybody want to take that one?
I guess I'll start. I think we were fortunate enough to have been ahead of the curve in terms of the SAT, ACT optional policies. We were SAT or ACT optional prior to the pandemic occurring. We're still test optional today. There's been speculation and talk through the Board of Trustees that we may actually become a test blind institution. So regardless of whether a student submits test scores, we will not be using them in any kind of evaluatory manner whatsoever. And just like Donna had mentioned, it's always been my feeling, and if anybody here works for College Board, I apologize. It's always been my feeling that a singular 4-hour exam is not a prime indicator of a student's potential of success over a 4-year span in college, okay? I think that once upon a time, the SAT actually stood for a Scholastic Aptitude Test. It's no longer even an acronym for that. So it's not, I don't even know if it's necessarily measuring aptitude any longer. I think it measures your ability to take a standardized test. I'm off my pedestal, but what I will say for sure is, you know, of the 3,500 some odd schools in the country, I think at last count by fairtest.org, I think is 70% of us are test optional now, give or take. So do your due diligence and research, talk to your guidance office here to figure out which schools that you've identified that you want to explore, you want to potentially, you know, apply to, you want to visit, find out which of those schools are test optional. And then if you are completely bored out of your skull and you got 4 hours to kill and you want to go ahead and take the exam, fine. But do yourself a favor, do the research ahead of time. Most of us we're not going to be using them. So, Mike, how are things different in the state system?
I'm okay with that.
You're welcome.
So as a community college, we do not require the SATs for general admissions. Something around the neighborhood of 99% of our programs do not require the SATs at all. We do have 2 or 3 of our competitive admissions healthcare programs that do have SATs as a requirement, but there is a waiver condition. For programs, for example, I believe physical therapy assisting off the top of my head, I don't read for that program, but I think that's one that has it. It does ask for SAT scores, but the SAT requirement can be waived if the student has 15 or more college credits. And if you look at the requirements to get into a program like that, the student is going to need at least 15 college credits in things like anatomy and physiology, medical terminology, college-level English in order to apply. So essentially, those programs that do have the SATs, most students who apply to those programs, it's really their choice. If they have good SAT scores, by all means submit them for those very small handful of programs. If not, that's okay, because right out of high school during that first year when they're doing their admissions requirements for those healthcare majors, they can accrue those 15 college credits and not have to take the SATs for admissions at all. And it's only for those very, very small handful of programs.
So I would say if you're wondering, should I submit them, should I not submit them, will it help me, will it not help me, I think it's going to depend probably on the school, because some schools do them differently. You know, like for example, we're test optional, but if you send them, we do review them as part of our admissions decision. So you do kind of want to think about it. And there's a couple different things. You can ask your guidance counselor, ask me, ask us what we think. You can look at our averages and kind of see where you fall, but it is going to differ per major, so you kind of want to keep that in mind because it can help a student if they have, well above average SATs, and it kind of depends on what your GPA is, what the other, it's a piece to the puzzle. So what is the rest of the puzzle saying about you? Is this adding a positive piece? Is it telling us something different about you? It can help, but not in every situation. So I do think that it's important to look at averages or talk to your guidance counselor, or talk to somebody in our admissions office to see if it's a good idea to submit them or not.
And I'll just add the same, like Xavier, Mount Holyoke has been test optional for over 20 years. So the team of readers there is very familiar at evaluating and assessing the ability of students, even if they don't have test scores. So I always recommend, just like Erin said, look at the averages for the institutions you're applying to and see if the test scores that you've received, if you've already taken them, or even if you've taken pre-exams, put you above their averages, right? And if that's one more way that you can be competitive in that pool. And there are other things to think about too, right? Like, do my test scores put me ahead of the average for my high school? Because when we read, we're looking at that as well, or for my state. So we're really trying to take every piece of the application process, all the information that you give us, and be thoughtful about how you present, not just, as an individual, but within the high school group of students from your institution who may be applying to ours, and then within the state, and then within our pool, right? So all of those things are going to be taken into consideration by us. And if the test scores do not help you, if they do not put you at or above the average, or at least within, the middle 50% of that institution, don't feel compelled to submit them. It doesn't, we don't go, oh no, they didn't submit test scores, so they're not gonna get in, right? We never, ever, ever think that way. We really only know what you give us. And so if you give us something that we would consider way off trend, everything else looks awesome, and then we have this test score that now we can't ignore, because I've been in that situation where I'm going, why did they do this? They should have just not, because we thought you were perfect until we looked at this. Now we've got a whole heap of questions that you may not have answered in your application, right? Because you haven't been thoughtful about the way we were going to use the test scores. And if you're thinking about it in advance, or if you are applying to a school that requires them, and you know those test scores don't represent who you are really well as a student, then you prepare differently. You say in advance, look, you're going to see these scores. Let me tell you why they're not a good reflection of who I am. But when it's the opposite and scoring is optional, and you submit them and haven't really put the thought into whether or not they're going to help or hurt, then we're left to make up the storyline on our own, and most of the time we don't get it right. So you don't want us to be in a position of reading your application and not knowing why we have this piece of the file that's off trend. So,
If I could just, one caveat to that would be to have open lines of communication with your guidance office. In specific, find out if a university that you're looking at or college is test optional. If they are, terrific. But also find out, is it a negative if you don't submit when being considered for scholarships? Okay, so it's my opinion that you are all very judicious people in this room. You are going to thoroughly investigate the schools before you submit a deposit to that one particular institution that you're going to call home for 4 years. But also understand that some schools will say, yes, we're test optional, 100%, and then there's a ... after that. Find out who your admission counselor is and have a heart-to-heart conversation saying, listen, I'm a 3.75 student. I took the SATs. I didn't do nearly as well as I should have based upon what my GPA is. If I apply to your institution, what's the likelihood that my scholarship will be negatively affected if I do not submit these scores? So it's worth asking.
Yeah, and I think at this point in time in the process, you want to be prepared for whatever colleges are looking for. So my advice, and I'm not sure if it's the correct advice, but I think, you would all agree, I'm suggesting to all of my juniors, take the exams, whether it's ACT or SAT, because you may not know of a school that eventually gets on your list that does require them. So for that reason, I would take them this spring, get your scores, and then it'll allow you to decide whether or not, based on schools that might require them, do you need to take them again or not? I think it's good advice, because I've been saying, and I think all of us in the school counseling office have been saying this, if you are in that middle 50% or above, it might make sense to send. But as Aaron said from UMass, it does depend. If it's a school where they're specifically accepting you for a particular program, please make sure you do your research, whether it's calling the office or asking us, to make sure that it does make sense to send your scores. With so many colleges being test optional, what additional criteria are you aware of or using at your school to help make an admission decision? And it may not be anything. I know, Lakia, you've been test optional for so long. You said people are just, they just have that awareness now of who to accept. But I'm just wondering if there's anybody that has looked at other criteria. Are there other things that have become part of the process?
I can just say really quickly that at a school that's been test optional as long as Mount Holyoke, one of the things that really, really matters is writing and supplemental writing as well. So we get really jazzed when you take the time to do the stuff that we recommend but don't require. And the supplemental essay is something that we recommend but don't require. And so your writing, the quality of writing, the rigor of your curriculum in school, what classes you've chosen to take, all of those things matter much more to us than just, as Jason said, the score you got on the test that you took for 4 hours on a weekend, right? So it's a little bit difficult for me to wrap my head around that coming from UMass, right? Where we're looking at all of those things sort of together with testing before, obviously, the pandemic. So to be in an office where we very, very heavily think about all of the small pieces, some of which are not within your control, especially writing, which we think is in your control, right? And you can edit it and edit it and edit it until it gets to a place where you like it. You can obviously work with your counselor to improve it. I know for us, that's a really big piece of what we value in the application process.
So I would say that it was a big shift, not a big shift, it was a shift for us to not have, because we used to require them, and now we don't. And so it was a shift for us, and I always say, like, even if we go back to requiring tests, which I hope we don't, but even if we do, I think that it was such a good experience for all of us as readers, because we really did have to pull from every piece of the application to really understand the context of your academics. And I think that, not that we didn't do that before, but it was like even more reinforced. And I think it was actually like a really good thing for us as readers to have to do that. And we kind of changed our whole reading process to try to streamline it as much as possible, because we have a lot of different people reading. We want to make similar decisions. And so I think even that stuff will stay. So I think that was really helpful. There wasn't anything else we asked for. It was just the amount of detail and attention we spent on the things we've always asked for, like, your activities and your essay and your recommendations. And one thing I want to say that I think whenever I advise students that I think Kia kind of got on, which is like, if you really like a school and they have an optional anything, I would do it. I always can think about, like, when I was in college and we would have optional practice for hockey, I was like, is it really optional? Like, if I'm not going, what is that saying about me? So I always think, like, if you really like a school and they have a way for you to show how much you like that school, you take it.
I guess a couple of the pieces that I would add to that. It's the extracurricular sheet, and I think I belabored this point a few minutes ago, about 2/3 of your day is going to be spent outside the classroom. So for us being a Jesuit Catholic institution, a lot of our students, regardless of whether they've indicated that they're Catholic or not, obviously that has no bearing on admission, I think you probably know that, but what I'm trying to get at is their students' extracurricular sheets telling us the type of students and type of humans they are when they're not sitting inside a classroom. What are they doing to occupy their time? Okay, and if you go to any of the 27 Jesuit institutions around the country, you understand in real quick order that the world doesn't revolve around yourself. It just doesn't. Okay, you're going to want to give back to that family and that community that you're calling home for 4 years. You know, the recurring Jesuit theme is men and women for and with others. So you're going to try to leave the world a better place than when you arrived. Okay, so for us, looking at a student's extracurricular sheet might be significantly more important than other institutions, because we want to make sure that when you get here, you're going to hit the ground running. Your adjustment period is going to be a couple of weeks. You're going to finally get a firm footing, and then you're literally going to go out into Cincinnati or into Northern Kentucky or wherever you happen to be, and you're going to help. That's just what the Jesuit schools do.
Thanks. These next few questions are related to the high school transcript. Has the high school transcript become more important now in the absence of test scores? Our transcript lists the courses for grades 9 through 12. It lists the level of the course. It lists the credits. And then it also lists our unweighted and weighted GPA. And one of the things that I often say to students is, we could remove that weighted and unweighted GPA from the transcript, and it wouldn't make a difference because often colleges recalculate it. They're looking at the rigor of the courses that you've taken. So I think, you know, the transcript is scrutinized and looked at overall, not just that so often students concentrate on, oh, my GPA, I need to get over a 3.0, I need to get over a 3.5 or whatever it is. With that said, is there a difference between how a student has performed academically in their freshman year in comparison to their senior year? So 9th grade, they come in, they transition in from middle school. It's not always the best transition for all students. How is that looked at on the transcript?
I'll start. So you kind of hit the nail on the head where you're saying we're not just looking at the GPA. And I always, in all of my sessions, I explain that to people that, you know, the first question, is the transcript more, and like looked at more? I would say it's always been very important to us, and it's not necessarily more important now. I'd say it's just as important. But when we look at your transcript, we're not just looking at your GPA, we're looking at the school you went to, the classes you've taken, the rigor of your schedule. We're looking at the trend in your grades. So you talked about 9th grade versus other years. We're very aware that sometimes students have a hard time transitioning, and we really are, you know, our decisions a lot of times are trying to predict how well the student's going to do at our specific school. So we talked about, you know, the service is really important at Xavier, and so they're looking for that student who's going to contribute to that and be that student who's going to be successful there. So we're looking at all of those things, and for some of us, if you're doing well junior, senior year, and that's the student you are now, and that's the student that's going to come to our school, then yeah, we're definitely taking that into consideration. So I would say, at least for us, looking at trends in grades is pretty important.
I would certainly echo everything that Erin just said, but knowing where we are today with the hiccups of COVID and understanding that there was probably a roller coaster of grades, we're also very understanding of that. I think spring of 2020 to now is unlike anything else any of us have ever seen. So we get that. I think if there's one piece of advice or one quip you can take with you tonight, it's that we're your biggest advocates. We want to admit you. Just understand, we're not the devil. We don't get our kicks out of sending out denial letters. Honest to goodness, we don't. We want to admit you, but we want to make an educated decision based upon the strength of the curriculum that you've taken And have you overcome the COVID hiccup that you had from learning remotely in spring of junior year, and spring of, well, right now it would be spring of freshman year, is that right for these students? Juniors?
Yeah.
So that would have been spring of
Yeah.
freshman year, right?
Yeah.
Okay, geez Louise, getting old.
Mm-hmm.
So we're understanding and we're sympathetic towards that. And a lot of that information is going to be found most likely in the college recommendation letter, college counseling recommendation letter anyway, so.
All right, thanks. Mike, I'm going to ask you to answer this question. If students feel that they have not done as well academically as they would have liked in high school, can you talk about the different programs that are available to students who start at a community college?
Absolutely. So for students that start at one of the 15 community colleges, many of the students are looking at it as a stepping stone onto a four-year college or university. Some students may just stay with us for just a semester to raise their GPA before transferring out, or if they want to stay to complete the full associate's degree, there's a variety of transfer opportunities for them. If they're staying within the state college system, there's a program called Mass Transfer, which is the agreement between the 15 community colleges and all of the four-year state colleges and universities. If a student is in a, for us it would be an academic program, if they're in a transfer pathway, basically a pre-approved major at any of the 15 community colleges, and they graduate with a 2.5 GPA with their associate's degree, space available, they can transfer seamlessly on to any of the four-year state colleges or universities that also have that same degree. So in essence, they would do their freshman and sophomore year at one of the 15 community colleges, graduate, as long as they get that 2.5 GPA, they can transfer out to continue on as a junior at one of the state colleges or universities. Exceptions to this, though, that should be noted that the 2.5 is generally what they need. However, specifically at UMass Amherst, there are 4 majors there that are going to require a higher GPA. The nursing program, computer science, the business program, and then engineering. The transfer agreement still applies. However, the students will need a higher GPA. And there actually is a mass transfer website that will actually show you, if you start at certain programs at any of the community colleges, what four-year colleges and universities you can then transfer into getting your bachelor's degree to. Additionally, if you get a 3.0 or higher as your final graduating GPA at the community colleges, there is a tuition waiver when you go on to the four-year college. Now, when I say tuition waiver, if we are talking about state colleges and universities, like for example, at my institution, a single 3-credit class, tuition and fees is roughly $700-something right now. $75 of that is tuition. The rest of that cost, $700-something, is fees. So realize when you are getting a tuition waiver, it doesn't mean that you get to go free to that state university, but you do get substantial savings. The majority of the state college costs are typically in fees. So it's still a substantial savings, but it does not mean you get 100% off when you transition out. Now, if you want to not go with the state college system, we also have several transfer agreements with our local private four-year colleges and universities, such as Bay Path, Springfield College, the Elms, AIC, etc. They don't have a blanket 2.5 GPA. The GPA that you need is going to vary depending upon the major that you're transferring out to and also the college you're going to. But in most cases, the private colleges want a similar or even sometimes lower GPA than what is required in the state college transfer. And it operates essentially the same way. If you graduate from that program, get the minimum GPA required, they will take you on as a junior. And if you get a higher GPA, instead of giving you a tuition waiver, there are transfer scholarships when you move on to the private four-year colleges and universities. And of course, the higher your GPA is when you graduate from STIC or HCC or GCC, the more transfer scholarship money you might be eligible to if you're going on to a private school.
You know, Mike, I'm glad you brought that up. And I think if you find yourself in a position where you haven't lived up to your own expectations throughout your high school career, and there's a scenario where you're going to apply to one of the community colleges locally, there's a little known fact, and I think Mike was just starting to touch on this, that it's usually easier to get into four-year institutions as a transfer student than it is as an incoming first-year freshman. You've already You've already done college work. You've been in a collegiate environment. We're reading your transcript. We understand that you've taken collegiate level classes. So it's usually a little bit easier. And at least at Xavier, that holds true. And additionally, the scholarships that Mike was talking about, we have a whole separate pool of money that first year incoming freshmen don't have access to. It's a whole separate pool of money that we dedicate strictly to transfer students.
So the course selection process for our students for next year will begin in March. How important is the course selection and grades in the senior year?
I can take this one. So after just finishing reading many, many apps today and going, gosh, I wish I had more grades. I wish I had more senior grades. They're really important. So especially for students who hit their stride academically in their junior year, which is really common. Again, as you heard Donna mention, folks sometimes transfer in from middle school or come in from middle school and they have a rough start to high school, or maybe something happens part the way through, like, I don't know, a pandemic, and it impacts your grades, right? So we are looking at your grades all throughout your high school experience, and this really sort of ties into whether or not you choose to apply early decision or early action to a school. If you could stand more time in the process to show us more grades, then you may not want to apply early action or early decision to a school, because we really do care about you finishing strong. And to reiterate how important that is, and the other schools on the panel can attest to this if it's true for them, we even look at your grades after we've admitted you and you've deposited. Before you show up, we want to make sure you didn't tank and bomb out, right? And if that happens, we reserve the right to rescind your offer of admission. So please don't think that it's just like, okay, once I apply to school and they've seen what they've seen, it doesn't matter after that point. It really still matters to us. And of course, we're taking, the pandemic into consideration and whether or not your classes have been moved to virtual or in person or back and forth, and really being thoughtful about your individual situation. But we do need to have that confidence in you that you plan to finish strong.
I would also just add that you should look at what you're maybe looking to apply for, so that you know if they have specific class requirements, because there's nothing worse than talking to a student spring semester when they didn't get into a program and it's like, oh, well, you didn't take pre-calculus and that was a requirement and they don't really have an option anymore. So definitely look into, if usually that's, for us, it's like engineering, computer science, business. They have specific classes that they want you to make sure you have taken. And they're not really anything out of the ordinary. I would say a majority of students have these classes regardless of what they're applying to, but it's just important to kind of look into that if you are going to choose your classes, to make sure you have the right classes under your belt.
Erin, can you just talk a little bit about, too, how you look at, like, when you recalculate GPAs and everything, and how the senior year plays into that?
Yeah. So it plays a pretty big part, actually, for the amount of time you spend getting those grades. So when we recalculate your GPA, your senior year counts as a quarter of your GPA, which, even though sometimes it's just the first quarter of your grades, it is something that we do take with a grain of salt because of that. So it does go into, and when we look at your overall GPA, that 100% is a quarter of your GPA. But if it's vastly different than the rest of your high school career, that we might ask some questions both ways. So sometimes people have a rough start and they'll write to us, or their guidance counselor will write to us and say, like, oh, I had a rough start because of X, Y, and Z, and we might be like, okay, well then let's see what the second quarter looks like. But for us, when recalculating your GPA, sometimes that can really help a student, because like Kia said, a lot of students really come into their own in junior year, and then we're looking for senior year to really confirm that that's the student they are now. That wasn't just a one-year thing.
Anybody else? Okay. These next questions are related to the application essay. So the Common Application, accepted by many, many colleges, has several different essay prompts to choose from. Do you have any advice on how students should get started with picking their essay choice and how to begin writing their essay?
I'll take a crack at this. I think over my 20-plus years of working in college admissions, I've done more essay workshops than any other panel discussion. So the essay I'm incredibly passionate about because, quite frankly, it's the only part of your entire application that's 100% within your own control. You are the one person who has full control over what you choose to write, okay? You think about recommendation letters. Teachers, your guidance counselors, it's their opinions of you, okay? You think about the grades that you've earned, it's from your teachers. You think about the SAT, the scores you earn, it's from College Board. Not the essay. The essay is you. That's your voice. That's where you're gonna get your opinions or your, whom you are across to us, okay? As Don had mentioned, I think there's like 5 or 6 different choices for the Common App, right? I will tell you right now that probably 60 to 65% of every application that I read, there is one of 4 topics that I'm going to come across. And I can already see a couple of head nods right here on the panel because they already know where I'm going with this. We are a Jesuit Catholic Division I Big East Conference school. Anybody want to take a guess at what you think most of my application essays are about? Did I hear sports out there? Okay, there it is. Yes, sports, athletics, absolutely. Number 2, athletic-related sports injuries. If I read one more torn ACL on the soccer field, I mean, come on. I understand. I have 2 torn ACLs as well. I have bad knees. I get it. I sympathize. But guess what? You will overcome. It's not the end of your life. You're going to be great. I promise. Number 3, the person or group of people who inspire you most. 100%. And, and I love the fact that grandma and grandpa are in there, but they're not the ones going to college. The student is. And number 4, being a Jesuit Catholic school, as I mentioned, the service trip to a third world country, an emerging nation, whatever. I've read those thousands of times. I want to see something unique, something original, something that tells me about you, okay? And yes, you might be the star of the basketball team here. Bravo, that's awesome. But your parents also know you're way more than just being the point guard on the basketball team. I want to know that too.
Anybody else?
Well, I said at the beginning that we love writing at Mount Holyoke, so I definitely want to share that. I think if you're sort of trying to figure out where you're starting, where you should start or which prompt, know that to us, the prompt doesn't matter, right? Like if you have multiple options, it's because we don't have a preference of which one you should submit. So start with the one that you think helps you share your story the best, right? Like, I think one of the prompts even says, like, if there's something central to your identity that you need folks to know about you, this is the prompt for you. So keeping yourself in the center of the story is really, really important. And the prompt that allows you to do that is usually the one that will be the best fit for you. And don't be afraid to not start at the beginning. Sometimes we think we have to write in order to get our story out well. And you don't. Maybe you have to start at the end or in the middle. But ask for help. Ask other people to read what you're writing, people your age to read what you're writing, people older than you to read what you're writing, so that you have some confidence that the story you're going to share actually connects with us. And most importantly, don't forget that we are evaluating whether or not we should take a risk on admitting you to go to our respective institution. So if we don't have confidence in your academic ability because of something that is going on in your transcript or some issues that you may have had getting into the classes that you wanted, you've got to make a decision about whether or not that issue is big enough to write a whole essay about it, or if it just needs to be explained in additional information, right? Sometimes you don't want your whole essay to be about what happened that year that, your dog died and you were totally out of it for school, right? That may be your reality, but maybe you don't want to spend an essay on it. Use the additional information section of the application to tell us what happened and how that impacted your grades, and then you can use your essay to write your essay. But if it is the big story, then maybe you need to think about crafting it in and putting that together. So for sure, start with yourself and thinking about what it is that's most important for you to convey to us that we need to know to be able to say, yes, this is the kind of student that we want on our campus.
And be cautious about using the name of the school in your essay. We're all chuckling because I can't tell you how many times I've read that, oh, I want you to know, Purdue University is my #1 school. Then why are you applying to Xavier and including this in your Xavier essay? So just be cautious of that. And I know we've already talked about the supplemental essay. That's where you get the opportunity to really personalize the essay a little bit further to the school that you're applying to if you want to. But on the Common App, you click, and you submit it. We're all getting the same essay. So just understand that.
Yeah, and Lakia mentioned, have someone else read your essay. And I think that's awesome advice. And to take that one step further, have someone that knows you really well, who you trust to read your essay, whether it be a parent, a sibling, a good friend. Because I think the key to your essay is it authentic? Is it you? You don't want to be something that you're not. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece. They all understand. They read these often. They know, what a high school senior is like coming out of high school, going into college. They know that you're not an author. They're more looking for, in some cases, how well it's written, but more importantly, who are you as a student? And tell us more about yourself, regardless of the question. That is so important. So have others read it. In the summer, before your senior year, there's also a workshop that's held here at the high school where you can get your essay done, or at least started and looked at by one of our high school English teachers. So you can get that done before you even come back in your senior year. I know often that's probably, the most difficult thing to get started. So, start early, write down, some ideas, look at the questions. You can Google Common App questions so you know what they are ahead of time, and get started on that so you're prepared. These next few questions are related to activities and athletics and outside stuff outside of academics. So outside of academics, what specifically are colleges looking for in the application?
Sure. So we're looking, I know you've heard this already a lot, but we understand that a global pandemic might impact your ability to participate in co-curricular activities the same way that you would any other year. So, and I think this is true whether there was a pandemic or not. When we're looking at co-curriculars, we're hoping to see that the things that you've been a part of are meaningful to you and that you've sustained your involvement, right? So quality matters more than quantity for sure. And in the midst of a pandemic, obviously, quantity may not be available because things have been taken away that we used to be able to do in person. So we totally get that. But we're looking at all of the pieces of your application. So the things that you're dedicated to outside of the classroom and whether that dovetails nicely with what you wrote about or what your recommenders say about you. So it's really awesome when we see a student who has been dedicated to a particular club or organization and their folks in their school community know them for that too. So just seeing if all of those things fit nicely together. We always sort of raise eyebrows when we see a co-curricular that is really cool, but maybe don't hear about it at all. So it's really not a fun feeling to read your application from cover to cover and feel like we don't know you, or like there's two versions of you, the version that your school community knows and then the version that you gave us in your essay. So be thinking about how you want to present yourself with what you've got on your plate. Beyond that, we're looking to see, what else you could do, even if it's at home. So maybe you're taking care of a little brother or sister, maybe you're supporting your grandparents, maybe you work a part-time job. All of those things are really valuable, even if you just study something on your own. So I like the guitar, I taught myself guitar, or I like Japanese as a language, so I spent a lot of time watching Japanese film or studying the language on my own. Sometimes you don't give yourself credit for things that are interests because it's not organized through a formal club or an organization at your school or in some more formal capacity. But the ways that you're spending your time outside of the classroom, be thinking about all of that and how to share it with us in a way that helps us get to know who you are.
I definitely just want to echo that it doesn't have to be like an organized thing by your school, because I think sometimes people lean on that, and it could be that you work, it could be that you take care of, you know, a grandparent or a sibling. We're really just looking to see how you spend your time outside of school, and I think when the pandemic hit, I was ready to see a lack of activities, and I was very understanding about that. And what I ended up seeing was a lot of students who got really creative in how they spent their time outside of school. And it was pretty impressive, some of the stuff they did. And it wasn't your conventional, like, oh, our Key Club met virtually. It was like they learned how to play guitar on their own, or they learned how to code, or they really took it upon themselves to fill their time with something. And I was pretty impressed by that because I wasn't really expecting that, but I do think it's good to kind of say that because I don't know that I would have thought to put that on my college application.
Yeah, I read a lot of essays that addressed the extracurricular sheet and how many students didn't get a chance to, you know, participate in tennis matches and their soccer team, or even, you know, go to their part-time job. But they did start an online business, and they're selling shoes and sneakers and video game consoles from Atari from the 1980s. And I mean, I'm reading all this stuff all the time now, which is really remarkable that these students are this creative, that they figured out another way to supplement their income without actually even having to leave the house, which is really pretty cool. So I take that and I go, this is the type of student that is motivated, that I think is going to hit the ground running and be the least of our concerns. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I think we're often asked by students and parents and guardians, you know, what should I be doing? What kind of activity should I be doing? Should I be playing sports? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? Should I do research in the summer? Should I go to this program? And I think, you know, what you're hearing here is that it doesn't matter. It's just how are you spending that time? Because not everybody can do all the things that other students are doing. So it's again, more about, you know, can you manage your time outside of academics? Are you just doing academics, or are you doing these other things? And how can you explain that to colleges in your application? It's so important to put it out there. One of the things that I just got finished telling sophomores as we introduced them to Naviance, Naviance has a resume builder. So whether or not students use the resume builder or they use a Google document to document what they're doing, because it's really difficult to remember everything that they've done if they've done a lot of things from 9th grade through 12th grade. So document it so that they can recall it a lot easier in their applications. It's so important that they put it all out there because the admissions professionals, they don't know you like your teachers know you, like your families know you, like your friends know you. So you really have to put it out there and talk about yourself. So with that said, and I mentioned summers, does it matter how a student spends his or her summer?
You mean on Cape Cod or here in Springfield? I think, at least for me anyway, because I'm, 850 miles away from here, I think that if you have the opportunity to take a road trip and visit a variety of schools that are within a certain geographic region over the course of summer, it's certainly going to help you when you start applying in the fall. But I also understand the expense associated with leaving the greater Pioneer Valley to go and visit schools that are going to be, at least a 6-hour drive or more away, because then you have to start looking at flights. And first, it's the struggle that I faced for a long time working with students here in the Northeast, is knowing that I have to get it past mom and dad that putting their kid on a plane is a good idea, right? So understanding that and going along with that particular line of thinking, I usually tell a lot of families that if by the time senior year has rolled around in high school, if the student hadn't visited yet, why don't you wait until the student has been admitted, has received the financial aid package, and understands what the bottom line cost of attendance is going to be? If all three of those dominoes have fallen into place, and we are an economically viable option, and we have the major the student's looking for, get in the car, get on a plane, and come visit then. It's okay to visit in the winter. It's okay to visit in the spring. This is the reason why all of us have our admitted student programs in the spring of senior year, because these are big showcase events for us. So it's okay not to have visited over the summer, but if you have a week or two and you want to visit a whole bunch of schools here in the New England area, you can make an entire week, week and a half of it. There's a lot to see and a lot to do when you're just driving in the car. So it's totally okay.
This next question is related to students who have learning differences. How does a student know if a school or program will fit their academic needs?
Well, some schools have specific programs that are geared towards students that they need to apply for specifically within a school for students that have learning differences. For us and probably some other schools that don't have specific programs like that, I would say talking to whatever office on campus handles accommodations, just to make sure that whatever accommodations that school has to offer is gonna be enough for you, is gonna really help you succeed. I know our office, they will meet with you before you apply. They'll meet with you whenever you want, just to kind of go over what you might need, what they have to offer, and they can kind of work with you to see, is that gonna be something that's going to set you up for success or not? And I think that that's going to be pretty important, because not every school offers the same things. And so it might be a surprise to you that they have created this learning environment that actually is going to be really perfect for you, or you might find the opposite, that you went to a school that you thought might have a bunch of services that are geared towards you and they don't. So I think the common theme is doing your research and finding out, because we all are different, just to make everything easier for you. We all have lots of differences. So just kind of doing your research and making sure that whatever you need to be successful is something that that school has to offer.
I would add to that, that talking with your guidance officers, I think the biggest questions that I get is when I'm talking to Donna, and she says, I'm working with the student and the family, and they're wondering whether they should self-disclose that the student has a learning difference to begin with. And if it does, and if it is disclosed, is that going to hinder the potential admission at your university? Again, it's institutional, I think, as Erin was just saying, that I think the guidance office here has built a strong foundation of relationships with a lot of us, and that having these open and honest, transparent conversations is going to go a long way, and just kind of calming the anxiety and the fears that not only the parents are having, but the students are having about whether they should disclose it to begin with. You know, at Xavier, if a student has a learning difference that is not going to set them up for success at Xavier based upon what we offer, we're going to tell you flat out, we think you'd probably be better off applying to a different institution. However, it's a case-by-case basis. Every single student is different. They're not lumped into one particular group. A student who has ADD isn't going to get lumped into the ADD applications, and so on and so forth. So we want to see you succeed, but it's going to probably entail more than just talking to me. It's going to probably entail talking to the Center for Disability Services on campus. So anything, Mike, different that stick, or no? Good.
So as juniors embark on this process of finding colleges and visiting colleges, any advice that I didn't ask already? Any advice that you want to give before I open it up to questions?
This shouldn't be all encompassing throughout the course of the next year and a half, 2 years. Okay. And I know that we talked a little bit about strength of curriculum from Long Meadow High School versus other high schools, and strength of curriculum within your own class. I get that. This is your journey, and your journey alone. Okay, maybe you have a twin and you're doing it together, whatever. But you get my point is, this can be fun if you allow it to be fun. Okay, especially when you start visiting and you're going to other areas of the country that you've never been to. That's pretty exciting in and of itself. Okay, but understand that this should not encompass your entire week. I can't tell you how many seniors I met with last fall that on top of COVID, on top of coming back to in-person classes, on top of starting their jobs again and playing sports again, they're in the throes of trying to apply to colleges, and the look of anguish and anxiety was written all over their faces. I wouldn't even talk about Xavier for at least 10 minutes. I was trying to get to know the student themselves and find out how they're doing. Really, how are they doing? Not I'm good. No, how are you feeling? How often do you and your family talk about the college selection process? Resoundingly, they all said every single day. That's not cool. This should not be a daily conversation. Live your life here. You're a student, you're a brother, you're a son, you're an employee. You've got a variety of other things going on. Your entire life should not revolve around the college selection process. It just shouldn't. Pick a day of the week or 2 days. Sunday night after dinner, from 7 to 9 o'clock, you talk about it. You revisit what happened throughout the week, whatever. But this should not be a daily conversation. That's my advice.
And if you plan in advance, it doesn't have to be a stressful process. I mean, I always say, and I think, kids look at me like I'm crazy, it can be a fun process. It's so much fun to get out there and visit schools. And if you do it, I think it's just taking that step forward and beginning the process rather than becoming immobile.
And learning from your peers. See what the class ahead of you has done. And I'm sure you all have friends there, so ask them. What advice can you give me that you wish you had known?
Thanks so much for coming. I want to thank our panelists. They're in the middle of their reading season, so I appreciate them being here.